Hi, welcome to Module 9, How to Give a Great Interview. Remember, this is the Udemy course on how to sell more products using free radio interviews. Now, one of the important things, and a distinction that we have not yet drawn, is whether your interview will be in studio or a call-in. Now, in my career of about 175 interviews, I can only think of about 10 that have been actually in the studio. You know, if you live in New York, you might get more, or Los Angeles, but you shouldn't expect that many of your shows are going to be local. As a matter of fact, a vast majority will be the call-in show. And you're going to treat these just a little bit different. For a show that you actually go to, when you actually go to the studio, I want to give you some pointers. First, you need to show up early, 15 minutes early, so that they're not worried, they're not freaking out that they're not going to have a guest. There's nothing scarier than having a guest not show up. You also want to dress casually. Blue jeans are fine. Usually radio stations are very casual work environments, and the host will be a very casual person, usually in blue jeans and a polo shirt or something like that. So dress casually and comfortably. There's no reason to dress up with a suit and tie for a radio interview. I would also take a jacket because it's probably going to be a little bit over air conditioned in the studio. And there are a couple of times where I remember sitting there shivering during an interview. I'd also love to take the host a copy of my book or my promotional materials, anything that I can to make the host feel like I thought of them. And finally, I want to take a camera. I want to have a camera with me, maybe even just my iPhone camera, so that I can get a picture with me in front of the microphone with the headphones on and hopefully have the logo of the station in the background. That's a great picture that you will then use for retweeting and for your social media files. It's a great thing to do. Remember to get a picture of you on the interview. It adds to no matter how you present the information. All right, now I want to give you some of our pointers for having a great interview. And these are true whether you're live or on the phone. Pointer number one, well, it's only about telephones though. You know, it used to be that a host would require you to call in from a landline, an actual POTS telephone system, you know, plain old telephone system. They would get very upset if you would call in from a cell phone. I actually remember one time one of the guests on my radio show called in from a moving, open convertible. I couldn't hear the guest. All I heard was the noise of the wind. I'm to the point now where if a guest calls me and the audio quality is poor, I simply refuse to do the interview. If you can't call from a good phone, you obviously don't care enough to be on my show. Now, however, in the advent of these incredible cell phones, for example, the iPhone 5 has a noise reduction capability built into it. There's actually a microphone on the back of the phone that records the ambient noise and reduces it, takes it out of the audio signal the phone sends out. I'm finding these to be an even better call quality than you can get using a plain old telephone system, a POTS telephone system. Because of this noise reduction technology, the iPhone 5 is probably the best way you can call into a radio show now. They may ask you, are you on a plain old telephone system or are you on a landline? And I've lied in the past and said, yeah, I am. How's the quality of my signal? They say, oh, you sound great. I'm like, see, it's because I'm on a landline, when in fact I'm on my iPhone. Please be aware that the quality of the call makes a huge difference to the host. All right, let's move on to point number 2. You need to be in a quiet environment. Well, I do a lot of my call-ins from my house, where I have a large Doberman who walks around making loud, sloppy noises, and a 2-year-old baby that loves to run around and tackle me whenever he thinks it's funny. I have done interviews where I'm literally running around my house trying to hide from my dog and my baby, just desperate to find a quiet spot where I won't be interrupted. Let's not play this silly game and in advance try to find the most quiet place, hopefully not a moving convertible, where you can have a good, quiet conversation with the host. The worst thing is when there's a silent background in the noise or noise in the background. It just makes you look incredibly unprofessional. Don't do it. Point number 3, I want you to smile during the interview. Now this may sound crazy because you're not on the video, you're on an audio signal. However, Your voice sounds better when you smile. Your voice sounds more energetic. You're more energetic when you smile. Do anything you can to make the quality of your voice sound better. And one of those important things is to smile. Believe it or not, smiling will make you sound better. I get asked the question frequently, how do I work on my voice? How do I make my voice sound more interesting on the radio? Well, I want to give you a little advice. Go buy a children's book. I have 3 children, and so I've read these children's stories 1,000 times. And these stories require the parents to make silly noises and to make scary noises. Well, then the baby walked into the room and was afraid of the monster. Things like that. Practicing reading these silly stories will make your voice more interesting, more rich. It will make your intonations much better, and it will create for a better interview. Sounds crazy, but it's worth doing. Point number 4. While you're standing or while you're smiling, I want you to also stand. I don't want you to sit down for an interview. One thing, when you sit down, it collapses your diaphragm, and you don't have as good a control of your air. Another thing, when you're standing, you're going to be more energetic. You're going to sound better. So not only do I want you to smile, I want you to stand, walk around if you have to. Your interview will sound more energetic because of that. Point number 5. I want you to be ready to take notes. You're going to have to take notes at some point. So be ready with a pen and paper to just write down a couple of words to remind you to bring that point up later. Almost always, I find that having some paper and pens handy has made the interview better. Point number 6, I want you to have a drink ready at all times. Always have a drink ready so that when the host asks a question, you can take a sip and refresh your voice and make sure you sound good. Point number 7, I want you to be passionate. You should sound as passionate as possible about this. That's one of the reasons I want you to stand and smile. There's nothing worse than listening to someone who has a monotone, who just doesn't seem interested in what they're talking about. I would never listen to that person, and I don't want that person on my show. So I want you to sound just as excited as you can be. Be energetic. Do things with your voice that indicate I care what I'm talking about. And finally, point number 9. I want you to push emotional buttons. Maybe it's point number 8. I'm sorry. I want you to use emotion and push emotional buttons if you can. If you can make the audience cry by telling a sad story, do it. If you can make people laugh, do it. If you can talk about the incredible emotional impact of something happening with your business, talk about that. Right now, my wife is running her Amazon business. She's grown it from $500 to almost $50,000 in 1 year. And when I talk about that, that's an interesting story. But the way to make it passionate is interesting is to talk about the incredible benefits it's had to her self-esteem and how she's grown as a person. I can be very passionate about that. And so it sounds great, makes for great interviews. All right, I'll be back in my next video with more pointers on how to give a great video interview. Audio interview. I'm sorry. Be right back.